Hi everyone, my name is Sam Ng. I am a developer on the C# compiler team. You can visit my blog at blogs.msdn.com/saming. I typically write about a lot of this stuff, so you can get more detailed information there. Okay, so today I'm going to chat with you about a new feature in the C# 4.0 language called named and optional arguments. Essentially, what this feature is it's a bit of a syntactic sugar, which the compiler performs for you to basically make your code a little bit cleaner to read and easier to write, and easier to maintain as well. What the feature does is it allows library writers to specify a set of defaults that they want for the parameters for their methods, and allows library consumers to specify overloading argument values for them if they want to, or just omit them and use the default ones provided by the library writer. So to show how this works, let's go and write ourselves a little library here. So we've got a contact list class, and the first thing that every contact list needs is some way to search it. So let's go ahead and write a search method. And let's basically allow some filtering mechanisms. So maybe I want to filter based on the name of the person that I'm looking for. Maybe filter by age group. And maybe the city that I live in. Okay, for the time being, let's just write out the inputs that we gave it. And return null. Okay, now let's just go ahead and consume this by creating a contact list. And let's search for Sam, age 27, in Redmond. Okay, let's just make sure this all builds. And let's check the output. So we indeed get the name that we searched for, the age that we searched for, and the city that we searched for. Okay, so now suppose, in writing my contact list library, I want to have this notion of wildcards. Suppose, I want to let the user search for everyone who is of a certain age, or everyone who lives in a certain city, or everyone who's got a certain first name. I would really like to be able to allow the user just to specify exactly what they want. Well, one way to do this would be to introduce a whole bunch of different overloads, right? I can introduce an overload for search which only takes an age. I can introduce another one which only takes a name, one that only takes a city. But as you can see, that kind of gets tedious, especially when you consider, you may want combinations of these, right? You may want a search method that only takes a name and an age, or that only takes a name and a city. And so that becomes very increasingly complicated. Well, the beauty of the optional argument feature is that it essentially takes all of those overloads that you would have had to write and allows you to condense them into one by allowing you to specify that certain arguments are going to be optional, which means that the user can leave them out. So the way that we encode this in C# is we use the equal sign after the parameter name that you're using. So let's go ahead and make the city optional and use a wildcard star. And let's use an age of -1 as our wildcard and a name of star as our wildcard. Now what this basically tells the compiler to do is it says, okay, create a method named search which has 3 parameters. For the first parameter, it's going to be a string, and it's going to have a default value of star. So if the user decides not to specify that value, this is the value I want you to use instead. And the same is true for age and city. Now, a few things to note. The first thing is that when you're specifying default values, the compiler requires that you specify them at the end of your list of all of your arguments. So if I had a parameter that I didn't want to have a default value for, I have to specify that before I specify all of the other parameters that have default values. Okay, so now Now that we've got our default values specified, let's go ahead and try to consume them. So here in my search method, I'm just going to go ahead and remove all the arguments that I gave it. I'm going to build, and I'm going to run it. And we indeed do get star, -1, and star, as we expect. Notice that I could decide I want to search for everyone named Sam in any age and any city. So if I go ahead and build and run that, I get that I've got Sam, -1, and star, which is exactly as I expected. Okay, so this kind of half solves our problem, right? This solves the problem of creating overloads where we want to, not require the user to specify the age and the city, or all three of them. But I've got to, but if I'm going to allow the user to specify something, it's got to start with the name because that's my first argument. Well, really, what I would like to do is I would like to allow the user to omit the name, but maybe specify the age, or maybe omit the name and the age and specify the city. Well, this is accomplished by using the second half of this feature, which is named arguments. What this feature does is it allows the user to tell the compiler, hey, I'm only going to specify arguments for these specific parameter names, and so here's the name that I want to specify it, and here's the argument that I want to specify. For the rest of them, use the default values if they're there. The way you do that is on the consumption site, right here. First, you start by typing the name of the parameter that you want. Now, if you notice in our IDE here, we've actually been smart enough to let you know that, hey, what you're typing doesn't make sense with the rest of your program, but it does make sense if I look at parameter names. And so the IDE is going to help me autocomplete the parameter name. So I'm going to type the parameter name, and I'm going to type a colon, which tells the compiler that, hey, what I'm trying to do is specify a named value. Now again, look at what we've got in the IDE here. The IDE is giving us parameter help, and it's already telling us that, hey, the first parameter for this method is named name and has a default value of star. The second parameter is named age and has a default value of -1. And the bolded parameter, which is the one that I'm currently supplying a value for, is named city, and it's also got a default parameter. Also notice these square brackets around the parameters that they're giving you. That signifies that that parameter is optional. So now the IDE is telling me that I'm on the third parameter, it's optional, and its name is city, and the default value is star. Well, if I want to specify something else, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to build, and let's run again. And we indeed have that we've got star as our name, -1 as our age, and Redmond as our city. So a couple of quick caveats. Obviously, you can't specify the same name twice. And before I mentioned that with optional with optional parameters, you've got to specify them at the end of your list of parameters, so that anything that's not optional, you've got to have beforehand. Well, the same is true of named arguments. You've got to specify those at the end of all of the non-named arguments that you're going to give it. So for example, if I wanted to specify the first parameter by without using a name, I can just go here and say Sam. And then I want to specify the third parameter by name, then I can go ahead and have Sam as the first argument, and then follow that up with any number of named arguments that I would want. Okay, so as you can see, that gets us all the way there. We're now able to specify by name exactly which parameter we want, and we can just leave out the rest that we don't care about. And so the compiler can take care of fitting in the default values for the remainder of the arguments for us. So that's basically this whole feature in a nutshell. It's kind of a two-part feature. On the one hand, it helps make your code cleaner because you don't have to specify as many overloads as you would naturally have had to before. On the other hand, it also helps you document your code well, because when you look at the declaration of the method, you've got the default values inlined right there beside each parameter. And when you look at the call site, you've got the name of the argument that you're specifying right there as well. So hopefully you guys find this feature useful. We certainly have had a lot of fun writing it and playing with it and getting all the semantics right. So yeah, hopefully you guys like it. And until next time, happy coding.